Yes, please.
It's almost 7:04 on Wednesday, April 10th, 2019. Let me call the Town of Booth Bay Harbor Planning Board April meeting to order. Let me call the Wednesday, April 10th, 2019 Booth Bay Harbor Planning Board meeting to order. Our first order of business is to get our alternates impaneled for voting, and we need both alternates tonight.
Okay, I would make a motion that they both be elevated.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? So done. So we now have a full board of 5 participants. And now we can introduce ourselves.
Lee Corbin.
John Hochstein.
Bill Hamblin.
Chris Swanson.
John Dunsford.
And then the next order of business to approve the minutes of March 13th, 2019. I sent you all an email with a suggested amendment to the minutes, if that was okay.
Yes.
I would entertain.
move that they be accepted as amended by your suggestion.
Thank you.
Point of order.
Yes.
In the minutes, is it required that the full documentation of all approvals and signature be included? And the reason I raise this is because the minutes, if there's more than what become this thick, and you lose the track of the substance of substantive things.
I understand. Did you
by
get my
putting
email
all that-
earlier about how the minutes will be done from now on?
No, I did not.
Okay, so they're going to be abbreviated. Kelly Bigos has stepped down as the recording secretary.
Right, and so,
And so I'll be doing the minutes for the foreseeable future anyway. They're going to be very much abbreviated.
okay.
We are going to rely on the recorded record being our record.
Yeah, the note is, for our official record will be the audio recordings.
That's that microphone right in front of you that's
Right.
recording everything. My minutes are going to be abbreviated. They are going to be
So we don't
very,
have
very
to
global.
waste time and put in who
We're not
made
going
a
to be, you're not
motion
going
and
to be
who
seeing a lot of
seconded
specific
it.
quotes. You're not going to be seeing a lot of that stuff. You're going to be seeing the real decisions and the actions, the larger stuff.
As for discussion on the minutes, I was not present, so I will abstain from voting.
Okay, we have a motion, but I haven't heard a second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes as amended. Any further discussion? All in favor? The minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is the Katama Acquisitions LLC, which has been is the Sprucewald. We had the site visit last Wednesday, and this has been tabled until May 8th at the request of the applicant, since they could not be here tonight and they would like to be here. I will just note for the board that we have received some legal opinions from the lawyer on the issues of the pool and the shed, and so I urge you all to read those and form your opinion on those so that we can discuss them at our next meeting. The next item is the application of William and Emily Holly, represented by Knickerbocker Group for 19 Central Avenue. The applicant proposes to demolish the existing cottage, bunkhouse, and garage and construct a new cottage and garage requiring planning board approval under Chapter 170, Article 8, Section 170-83 of the Code of the Town of Booth Bay Harbor. I see you guys are here.
Yes.
Like to give us an overview of what's going on?
Yes, my name is Bob Francisco, this is Frank James from Knickerbocker Group. First we want to begin, we want to introduce the owner is here with us this evening, and we wanted to introduce him and just give him just a little bit of his history in the area, if you would.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Holly. I live in York, Pennsylvania, the other York, and I appreciate the opportunity just to speak for a minute or two. I drove up 11 hours to be here tonight, so if I could have a minute, I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely.
It's nice to meet you all. I've seen you on TV, so it's nice to be here in person. My wife's family started coming up here in the late 1940s to the Spruce Point Inn, and my wife came up from the day she was born in the 1950s. And in 1962, when she was 8 years old and they were at the inn, she and Jennifer Druce became very good friends, and John and Charlotte and my wife's parents said, these girls need to go to summer camp, not hang around the inn. So they went up to Wabash Camp, and up in the next 10 or 12 years, my wife and Jennifer became very close friends, and they had their childhood and teenage years up in Lake Damariscotta. So fast forward to About 15 years ago, when we had a daughter that was 8 years old, we started coming to Spruce Point Inn. And we have been renting a cottage right over by the tennis courts for the past 15 years. Love it up here, beautiful. A little nicer in July and August than it is this time of year, but always nice. And we've enjoyed renting a cottage. I still work full-time down in Pennsylvania, so I wasn't ready to have any home ownership. And last August, some friends of ours, I guess their friends, said this property at 19 Central Avenue is coming on the market. And it had been in the Maud family, I think, for nearly 100 years. So we went over and looked at it, and my wife, Bambi, said, what do you think? And I said, it's very nice. And I said, what do you think? And she goes, I love it. So after being married for 40 years now, when my wife says we love it, we bought it. That's what brings us here tonight. So back in August, we contacted the Knickerbocker Group to see if they'd help us with the property. As you may know, it's a very old property. It's in disrepair. Some of the zoning, not zoning issues, but some of the roads that dead end there make it a little bit of an awkward situation. So we've really enjoyed working with Bob and the Knickerbocker Group. We would like to have a summer cottage, relatively small. There are just 3 of us in our family. We have no brothers, sisters. We'd like to improve the property, make it nice. We'd like to be good stewards of the property. We will pay our taxes. We'll pay them on time and in full. And we would like your consideration and approval for this project. And I would just like to close. I'd like to thank you all individually for your service. I know public service can be challenging at times, but I thank you for doing that, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Bill. I think probably it will be in order is for us to give you an overview of the existing property. One of the things to note is that the existing structures and the new proposed structures are entirely behind the 75-foot setback. However, they are within the shoreline zone. The other items to note is that this property, our building envelope, is almost entirely in the FEMA VE zones. We have both VE and AE zones. This particular dark blue line here represents a demarcation of the VE zone. So all the area from this line to the shore is in the VE area. Beyond here to this light blue line is all AE. This is the existing cottage here, the existing garage, and the bunkhouse. The one thing to note is that there are 2 culverts that are here right now that are dumping storm water on this particular property. One of our objectives in this improvement of the property is to actually do some underground culvert system to capture these 2 and run them underground and pick up. There's actually an existing culvert that picks up storm water at this point in the garage and takes it on out to sea. So we're hoping to reroute all this water that is currently running underneath the bunkhouse, underneath the garage, and get it around this side of the property and out to sea. As we mentioned, there are a couple of road easements that run through the property. There's Central Avenue that comes through here and essentially dead ends into the Hollies property. Once you get past their garage here, this essentially becomes a grassy area. Grandview Avenue right here is entirely grassy. It's just a road easement. So that's just a general overview of what we're working with here. And you can see here are our property line setbacks here. So this essentially is our building envelope. And what we're proposing is to demolish these structures and build a new house and garage. The garage fits entirely within the building envelope. The house, as much as we can, into the building envelope, that you can see in the illustrations that you have. We've got a portion that is into the side property setback, which is the reason why we're here tonight.
Just to sum this up, so essentially the existing house is non-conforming for the VE zones in the flood zone. It's also non-conforming to setbacks, being only 8'6" from the property line, but it is in the shoreline zone. Obviously, this is the 75 line here. And then in the same respect, the garage is also in the VE zone, and it's also non-conforming, and it's actually, if you count the roof overhang, it's crossing the property line in this corner. And then a portion of the bunkhouse is also property line here, so just a couple considerations to think about, the non-conformance of the existing structures.
May I ask a question? please?
Yep.
With respect to the existing culvert and the runoff going into that one area, is the existing culvert capable of,
Sorry, Bob. I'm asking about the existing culvert. And does it have the capacity to take the additional runoff? Or does that have to be upgraded?
No, it should not have to be up. Essentially, right now, it's almost passing, I mean, it's almost a way for the properties here to here to just, you see this rip wrap, this sort of material comes through here, and it essentially just drains through. We're not proposing to change that, and the increase in impervious is fairly small, as we'll get to, but what we are proposing to do is carry this in a slightly different manner below grade so that it's less invasive on the property. And that's sort of one of the things that's driving the design is we've got the limitation of not being able to build in the VE zone. And then we've got this whole corner that sort of needs to bring water across the site with the slope. And then we also have this area here, which is the edge of the AE zone. And the edge of it, because this is raised up and there's ledge, there's lots of ledge over here, so we're trying to avoid that area to not sort of, have to blast for that ledge and that sort of zone. So we're not expecting an increase in the actual water that's being carried, but we are going to be reconnecting this pipe sort of in an underground fashion to these existing underground pipes that spill out into this riprap. And these current buildings are on piers, so they're basically, the drainage is allowed to pass through, but we're going to reroute it slightly and shown on the new proposed plan.
So it is currently handling the runoff at this point. It's just everything is running on these buildings. So we're
Okay,
trying to-
and that's what I'm asking, is the additional runoff that you are now going to channel into this culvert, is the culvert big enough to carry this type of additional water?
It's carrying it currently. We're just rerouting it.
Yeah, we're essentially going to be carrying the same amount of water. It's really about carrying water from the other sites. So these sites aren't changing. We're
Right.
just connecting it to piping.
Okay,
And this is the existing piping. Basically, the pipe here, which is in green, is below grade, and it sort of opens up to above grade here to allow for the water to drain through the site. So there's not, and this is all, in between is all grass, so it's all pervious surface allowing site drainage. So we don't expect there to be, a large increase in demand because the structures, we're not locating them, they're back here where the drainage is occurring. So essentially it's going to be about the same. Get on to the new.
So here is the new proposed design. So you can see we have relocated the garage to be entirely within the property line setback. This is the new proposed cottage. We've actually moved the building back out of the VE zone, so it's entirely into the AE zone. The intention is that we'll be building the structure so that it meets FEMA code, which means it's going to have to be raised up so that the bottommost horizontal structural member is 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So this finished floor is at 23 feet right here. But the one piece and the reason why we're here is we have this section of the building, the new proposed cottage. Actually, we're trying to use the part of the existing building footprint that's here now for the design of our new cottage. And one of the reasons we're trying to do that is we've got some challenges here with the available area that we have for septic. Essentially, there were 2 locations on this property that the soils were appropriate for septic. One was over in this area where the garage is, and this area here that we're proposing to place the new septic, just right here. So this is the reason why we were advocating trying to use the existing footprint of the building as much as possible. The other issue that we have trying to move this structure closer to into this building envelope, we get closer to this road easement right here. And the challenges in being able to work with the grades and the approximations to this road easement are challenging. The other thing is that in moving structures into this building envelope, see how tight this is. We're trying to avoid getting into this area here, which is the ledge. And if we were needed to shift the garage over to fill the space in, we'd wind up having to blast ledge, which we're trying to avoid doing. So which is the reason why we're advocating using this existing building footprint. So you can see the proposed elevations. The overall building height is to not exceed 30 feet. You can also have an example of what our floor plans look like, so you can see the interior spaces are rather modest in terms of their scale. So we're trying to keep the footprint as compressed as possible, but still maintain the program.
I was going to note that I believe, so the existing site essentially splits up almost a similar program, right? There's the bunkhouse and there's the main house, so it's essentially like a 4-bedroom property.
Exactly.
And we're essentially replacing it with another 4-bedroom property, only this one being in one structure with the garage, the previous being in 2 structures on the garage. And essentially we want to try to keep this basically non-conforming setback on this side, although we have shortened it slightly. The lateral extent is 46 feet rather than, I believe,
49 feet.
49 feet or 49.6. And then we're pushing it back just a bit. And essentially we're doing that to, sort of one of the ways we looked at it was if we could match the area and volume for this sort of encroachment, then we felt could be justified, as even though it's, we're not looking at something in the 75, but taking, it's kind of an in-between situation because this is conforming to the shoreland zone, although it's non-conforming to the side yard setback. And so that's essentially why we're here. And we're proposing, we did some zoning analysis, which essentially we took the existing conditions and we have the structures labeled in here, and we sort of talk about how most of, they're all within the 250, they're all outside the 75, they're all in the AE zone, 2 of them are in the BE zone, and then we list sort of the area and the volume, so there's the 3 structures, and then we describe the proposed structure, which is not any more non-conforming than the existing ones, and then we reference some code sections essentially stating that, there's not really a good section that applies to this because, there's things, for example,
You noticed.
yeah, there's not really a good section that applies, which is why we're here. There's not a good section because we're sort of in between, and, it's these constraints that are pushing us to locate the house here. I mean, like we have to have, obviously, septic, you have to have a setback from the septic system. We know that we got to get the water through here somehow. We need to, we do not want to try to get it through where there's ledge. And then there's raising the house up. The elevation in the new house, the finished floor is at 23 feet. And so that's sort of to be in the code with having occupiable space in the AE zone. And to get up to 23 feet without having to raise the road, you obviously have to go up some steps and you have to build up the land a bit here. And the closer you get to here, the more you sort of have this very steep, tall foundation, because the foundations are already somewhat exposed, more so on the water side. But you would have, and then you have the ground sloping. So you kind of have, the closer you get to the edge, the more you get to having just a really tall wall, and which is not really the kind of look that's where it makes in that area. And it just makes for some challenges.
Quick question, did you decide not to expand the area of what you now have the garage to take into account the green space between it and the house and making it attached, either an extension of the house or an extension of the garage?
So you're saying attach this into the building?
No, I'm just asking, did you consider that? Is there ledge there or some reason that
We looked at actually having a connection of the garage to the house.
Not necessarily a connection, but to expand the house itself so that you could bring back and get more within the
Get
setback.
the square footage out of the setback area and
Yes.
between the house and the garage.
Correct.
Oh, you're saying it's closer over there?
No, we're just filling the space between.
Yeah,
Or
can I
fill
ask-
in.
May I ask a related question too, is that you said that there were challenges in bringing the house more towards Eastern Avenue,
Yeah,
and
Central
I'm not
Avenue.
sure exactly what those challenges are. I know you said that there's elevation issues.
Yeah,
But it seems to
essentially-
me if you were to move it just slightly in the, I'm calling it southeasterly direction, I'm not sure of my northeast,
Saying moving
southwest.
it this way?
Yeah, exactly, just a little bit to get it a little more conforming.
So while, basically, the more you move it this way, the closer you get to having a very steep wall. This is essentially lawn area, so we're trying to maintain impervious surface because we're limited to 20% being in the shoreline zone. And so we're trying to keep less retainage and leave some grassy area. And essentially, you also need steps to get up here. So the closer we get here, the more this really doesn't even become usable parking area. So that's one challenge, to get people to be able to actually park and not have to park, right now when I visited the site, I basically parked on Central Avenue in the middle of the road, even though it's sort of a dead-end road. And so to try to not be using the road as a parking space, but to keep this area here free is one of the reasons. And then also the challenge of, keeping this away from, obviously, the one location, which was limited in essentially all directions, I believe.
That's
Barney
correct.
had said.
Yeah.
The septic field, which really had no, they had to change the shape and size of it sort of in the 11th hour to try to be able to fit this in between ledge and other conditions on the site. So that sort of set that corner as well.
Yeah, there's a large knob of ledge that occurs right here, which is the reason that our original proposed septic field didn't work, and that's why we had to do this linear fashion here.
And you are making it less non-conforming by, what, 8 inches?
Yes, it is. So it's getting pushed back 8 inches, and we try to push it back as much as we could without having this really feel too tight for a car to park here. And we're to a shorter extent along this edge. And obviously, the other structures, the existing garage is currently right here, so that area becomes more conforming on this side of the property. Essentially, this sort of matches more or less, just to a slightly lesser extent, what's there now. And so that's really the gist of the project, is trying to get.
Since we're dancing around this, if I can, maybe take a few minutes and try and frame this discussion. You've obviously looked at our codes and pointed out there's a potential hole, but you are planning on leveling the existing structures on the parcel, is that not correct?
Correct.
Yes, that's
Yeah. And the conditions under which you can reconstruct a non-conforming, I don't think apply here, the way I would read it. And we got an initial read from the lawyer, which you can speak to in a little bit, Jeff.
Yeah, probably, you're on the right track.
So,
Again, you've got to conform to various practical extent, then.
Yeah, if this is a relocation, you can relocate a structure in the shoreland zone, provided you meet the setback requirements to the greatest practical extent.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm not sure I see yet that test has been made, and we can continue to talk, and you can make the argument that if you don't look at the shoreland zoning, but just the special residential zone, the regular zone, it also speaks to what happens. And it says any structure which is damaged or destroyed can be repaired or reconstructed in place within 1 year, provided that the floor area or volume after the repair reconstruction is no greater than the floor area or volume before the damage or destruction.
Yeah,
And
that's
so you don't
essentially what we highlighted here.
you don't really meet that test either, since the house is much bigger than the house that's going away. And they are, I don't think you can concatenate the structures. The fact that you have a garage and a bunkhouse and a cottage. I don't think you get to create all of those. Those structures are separate. So in either case, I think it's as if you're starting anew.
Yeah, although with some challenges, we also.
Yeah, no, and I understand the challenges. So I think the presumption of being able to go to that same setback is not there. It may be you get to go there because it is the greatest possible extent, but I haven't quite seen that case yet. And so I think that's what we're all dancing around here.
I'm supposed to push the button.
Yeah.
I want to talk to the practical extent.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I think, I look at water a lot. And when we have property in this particular condition, the management of water, I think, is almost more important. It's more important to me than the setback would be. And when you have the hardscape and the parking and the so forth, if you bring that house in a southeasterly direction, I'm guessing as well, I think it's more south, I think, you actually reduce the amount, you're making the situation worse. In other words, to have a bigger backyard instead of a non-conformance doesn't really help in water management. What they have, by having the house not as non-conforming as it is today, I mean 8 inches is a little better, but they need that grass where they have it because of the parking area. I'm sure you're not going to pave it. Is that correct?
Yeah,
It'll
there's a
be-
limitation, obviously, with the 20%. We've increased slightly impervious, but you're correct. We're trying to maintain not only the look, but also the drainability around the buildings as well, and including this side here. And, that was definitely, that's one of the challenges.
So I'm thinking,
I understand your point, but I don't quite understand your argument. If we take that block and move it, I don't pick it, number 4 feet closer to Central Avenue, you have changed where the impervious structures are, but you have not changed the percentage of impervious structures. So I don't think you've changed the water.
no, what I'm trying to do is maximize the green color where it's going to do the most good. The green color being the grass, where it's kept, I mean, the slope is to the lower left, right?
Yeah,
That's right.
it's sloping this way, so essentially, as you push the house here, you end up with all the impervious.
You have less and less and
So
less.
you're arguing the location of the green is what's
The location of the green is more important to me because you're gonna sheet flow across it to
No,
an
I understand
extent.
your argument.
But we're trying to keep the water retained as long as we can before it gets into the ocean.
Yeah.
But isn't that the purpose of the culvert? In other
No,
words,
the culvert
let's-
actually accelerates water getting
Well,
into the ocean.
I understand
When we
that.
close the culvert, we
But
put
in the green again,
Retention
you get
pond in.
between the space between the garage and the house. You would still have as much space if you pull off that which increases the setback.
So you're saying move it
It ought to be
easterly?
attached. It ought to be, no, you don't
No,
have to move it at all.
He's just saying you don't
Right
need to
here.
have all of that area in
Here in
the
these edges,
setback.
bring this in.
You can put some of that area in the building
His
envelope.
answer was fine. This drainage is coming in here.
And you can also have drainage under your foundation, as you know.
Yeah, we typically, we would have drainage, and I guess his argument is, the water here draining is from other sites.
That's from other
coming through.
sites.
We're sort of keeping this buffer zone here, and it was also to do with just the fact that this is a retaining wall, and then we have the retaining of, so it slopes up to a foundation that's exposed. And, essentially, you had looked at one point, looking at moving it closer to here.
I did.
Looking at moving it closer to where?
Basically what you're saying, because I had, when I first had seen the project as well, that was my initial thought was, can we slide it over a bit? And, you took a look at that and.
Yeah, what happens is the building essentially shifts over here and to this side. And what happens is it starts to compress this garage, which requires the blasting of ledge in order for somebody to actually make a proper turn to get into the garage.
Yeah, but to John's point, it looks like you've got, I don't know, 8 feet or so there that you could take before you had to move the garage.
Well, you
You're
totally-
saying this space in between.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
And John, to your point, Dunsford's point, if I look at the contour line on the far left, it looks like the water actually that's created on the parcel, for set aside for a minute the stuff that's coming down through the culvert from other parcels, looks like it moves to the center of Grandview Avenue, right? So see the contour line on the left side of the property?
The VE zone,
You're talking about
Yeah.
the.
Yeah.
That's the 75.
No,
Yeah,
that's not a contour line.
that's a 75-foot setback, which
Never mind, sorry.
is, the water is moving in that direction. And the much green you could have, that's why DEP wants the setbacks.
Yeah.
They want 75 feet of stuff to stop the water from getting into the sensitive shoreline. And I think they've achieved that. And all I'm addressing is one point.
No, got it.
Is in an argument of most practical extent, I would like to offer that managing the runoff water, their water, not the neighbor's water that's in a culvert,
Right.
is, to me, in my background, it looks better the
Got
way
it.
it is than if you brought the building forward,
Yeah.
it would be worse.
Assuming it stayed at that square footage.
Yeah.
The building could be smaller.
No comment.
So that's essentially why we did put the plans on, to show that, and why I mentioned we're sort of matching the existing program on the site, which is split up and sort of works because it's non-conforming. It works because it's overlapping all these edges of property, which allows for that split. And by combining it, we have sort of a very tight already plan, and so essentially we're matching what the 4-bedroom that exists on the site. And this is a slab on grade as well, so keep in mind, that's because it is in the floodplain, and so we can't have basement space for mechanical usage. And so that also drives, like, what could be an extra bedroom is, mechanical closet, 12 by 12 is what you need to do that properly
Yep.
in these days. So, that's another consideration to take in.
What is the height of the building?
30
It's
feet.
30 feet, so
From where?
30 feet from the so if you take the average grade at the existing, which is essentially, I believe, if we go back and forth, about 19-ish or so, because we pushed it back a bit, and there's 20 feet. The site's fairly flat, but it kind of goes uphill over here and gets higher. And so we've taken that average grade, and then we needed to raise up that finished floor level for the house. And so that would make what would normally be a 26-foot high structure sitting on a slab on grade becomes 30 feet. So we pushed that to the limit, because just to be able to get that to work in the zone, just sort of, we had a letter written and sort of, discussing this from Warren Jarrow, talking about, sort of the implications of building in the floodplain, which we took into consideration.
Yeah.
That was sort of what raised these structures up. And, one thing led to another, and that's sort of dictated.
What's on the second floor of the garage?
There's nothing, it's open rafters.
Yeah, there's not a second, so, yeah, it's just a roof space, so you would have to have door or space to actually have anything.
No, I was thinking of your mechanical problems.
So, one of the byproduct of us looking at the east side rezoning for a year and a half was that DEP came and looked at our zoning bylaws and told us we had been measuring height incorrectly in
Yeah.
the shoreline zone, and we must now, going forward, measure height from the average of the lowest side of the foundation, which
Yeah.
would be, looks like your front porch from there. And I think that kind of hurts your height calculation.
It's pretty close, that would be, so you're saying the exposed piece of foundation, you're saying? So you're
The
taking.
height is now measured from the lowest,
From the low point.
the lowest
The
side.
average,
The lowest side of the
average of the
new
lowest
side.
side.
Average of the lowest side.
Average of the lowest side, if you can figure that out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess, yeah, we're pretty close, so it could be probably worked out to be, by just not doing cleaning, I'm not sure, was that an 8-12 pitch roof? Like it was 7.5 and 12?
I believe that's a 10 and 12.
10 and 12?
Well, I believe the grade right here is about at 17 feet.
There's on this drawing anyway, the Terry Layton drawing, there's a 16-foot contour that runs across the corner about halfway down the house and then breaks off. And then it looks like there's an 18-foot that comes along. See, I'm looking at this
Yeah.
16-foot contour, see it runs under the
Yeah.
corner of the porch to about here and then runs off.
So what we've
This
done,
way.
we're pulling the whole house back beyond this BE zone. So essentially, the house is actually behind this point here, and I believe the contour around here is roughly, I think that's 17 feet.
Okay.
It runs through there. So that would be the lowest adjacent grade on the front of the building.
So 17 plus 30
Yeah.
would be 47 feet.
No, it's not at 17. We're 17 feet.
Well, it'd be 30 feet above the
No,
17
that right here I
foot.
measured 30 feet, and I believe that was from like the 18 line, so it could be adjusted to make that work. I mean, we're very close to it.
Yeah.
So that's how I read it.
On one of your drawings, I scaled, I don't know, 26, 27 feet from the 23-foot contour, which would put you at a 19-foot elevation in order to make 30 feet.
Yeah, so,
But you're aware that we've got a, that's our measurement these days.
yeah, that's the way
Yeah.
they've changed. Is that the way they interpret your code, or they're changing your actual code?
They suggested that, it is the way they are interpreting our code.
Okay.
In order to be consistent with the state guidelines for
Yeah.
shoreland height measurement, and B, they strongly suggested, is that a fair statement, that we change the wording of our code to make that evident.
Basically, they said,
Consistent.
measure it this way.
Yeah.
Your ordinance is not written as clearly as it could be, but it certainly can be interpreted to be done correctly. And they
Yeah.
told us to change it, which we'll.
And it's on the warrant for our May.
Okay, yeah, so we had interpreted that we were just conforming, so that would have to be adjusted slightly, but, I think that could be worked out, because it's not too far off.
I had a question, Bob, when we were on site that day that I mentioned, did you ever get a site, a design for septic?
I did, actually, I distributed.
I didn't see it here.
You
can have mine.
He doesn't want to go.
Thank
May I ask a question that's totally tangential to, or not even tangential, it's just another issue that I want to bring up. What do the abutters have to say, i.e. the Griffins primarily, who are just to they're your closest neighbors? Have you had any feedback from them?
We've not reviewed this with them,
This is
this house right here.
the property here. Yeah, and I believe their deck is actually non-conforming, so on that side.
Were they notified, Jeff?
I mean, we think that they would not have an issue with this, because actually I think their view is going to be better, because currently the existing house actually impedes the view from from their
This is
sunroof.
sort of the edge of the
So-
paper is where the existing house is right now, at the front of it. It's being pushed back, and the driving factor for pushing it back, of course, is that BE zone. Right now, it's in the BE zone, which is not allowable. And so the rebuild, pushing it back to get up, because you can't do the fill that we need to do to bring up that elevation in the BE zone. It's not allowable. So otherwise, it would be nice to be able to use this area here, because that's sort of the widest part of the site. So, but because of that line has to remain.
Sure. Okay. That was my question,
Yeah,
is,
so,
I
yeah,
mean,
we
they're
did-
not
we
here,
did-
so obviously.
That was one of the things, I had talked to Bob about, it's like, is this decreasing a view from their property? And, you sort of was like, we're like, no, it's actually probably improving the view, because we're pushing it back, and the view, even though the view is essentially the same here, because there's not sort of a hill or anything, it's very flat sloped land, this will increase their view in this direction.
Yeah, they've got a sunroom that kind of sits out here, so there's some side windows on that sunroom now that actually they'll be able to see the water.
Lee, I don't know if I'm allowed to speak or not.
Yes, of course.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm very good friends with Don Griffin, and Jamie and my wife's family go back forever, as you may guess. And Don and I talk frequently during the golf season, but I've not heard a thing from them. And Jeff, I guess if they've been informed, I feel like we're good.
Great,
But I have not heard anything
Yeah.
to the contrary.
great.
Thanks. For the purposes of moving our discussion forward, I guess I would like to poll the board to see if we're all on the same page with regard to evaluating this application in terms of the house and garage location to meeting the setbacks to the greatest possible extent. It seems to me that should be our mantra. In other words, it's not, I don't think it's a given that you get to keep the same setback. It may be that,
Yeah.
but I don't think that's a given.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think the board should go through and evaluate this to the greatest practical extent of where this can be. And if the board agrees with me, great. If you don't, let me know.
For kind of my opinion, I'm deferring to John, who knows a lot more about the movement of water, and if this is the best possible that he can see way to move the water, then I'm okay.
Yeah, I look at the FEMA line as.
I'm not suggesting we decide at this point that this is or is not the greatest practical extent. I'm simply saying that our decision should be that they meet the greatest practical
Yes.
extent.
Yes.
I definitely agree that that would be the criteria.
I do not.
Okay.
I'm perfectly happy with what they've designed. I agree with John.
Okay.
John D.
I wasn't asking John Dunsford to argue that this is the greatest practical extent. I'm simply asking the board, are we all clear that the decision should be made on what is the greatest practical extent?
The decision should be made on what is the greatest practical extent.
Yes.
Okay. And do you agree with that? Or? Okay. All right. So now we're on, is this the greatest practical extent or not? And we've heard one argument that thinks it is. I'm not entirely, personally, I'm not entirely convinced yet. I think I would like to see some more data rather than, you know, you've made some good arguments, but they're kind of, it's hard to move it here. You know, they're a little bit qualitative rather than quantitative. I guess what would help me is if we were to summarize and say, you know, we can't move it to the north because there's a ledge here, and we would have to blast it. It's not to say, you know, you can blast. Our codes don't say the solution has to be the cheapest one.
Yeah.
But you may argue that, and we can't move it down because of drainage, and we can't move it this and that. It seems to me, what I find, and again, now this is just me personally, this is not the board's, that somehow using the area between the garage and the house to increase the setback from the side yard line would be a good trade-off for me. But that's just my opinion.
I will counter that a little bit in that the existing structure is more non-conforming than what they're designing. So from that perspective, I would slightly disagree with you.
The code doesn't say it only has to be slightly more conforming. The code says it has to be as conforming as possible.
Got it. I understand that.
So the
Yeah.
fact that it is, what they have drawn is more conforming than what's there now is good, but it is not sufficient. We have to convince ourselves that it is the most conforming possible plan. It may be, but that's what we have to decide.
This means this water separates here, and this water separates. Unless this mechanical.
It's not an easy one.
No, it's not.
I will agree. We looked at this at many different times as well and did a few different sketches. And as, you know, each time it's sort of like it's just the pinch point. It's like the inconvenience of this. if this line weren't going here, if the septic wasn't here, that's what we sort of agreed upon. But, we did not want to connect the garage to the house.
Why?
And that's essentially we wanted to have a detached house and garage, because what you do is limit any of the natural light through here, and then you're also limit, we got a roof sloping into here, and then suddenly you have a roof sloping onto another roof, and that sort of compounds the area where you're impacted by where the water drains. And, currently the feel of the site is all these different structures, so maintaining that was one other thing important to us. So, there's different justifications for doing that. Not having a joint house.
Because it looks nicer is not a.
That's not just the only reason. It's this sort of, like I said, there's natural light, there's the fact that we want to maintain green around the house and around both structures, and then we can't push this too much further over here because we need to get that underground. For some reason, these did not exist too. That would definitely help this whole area, and I think Bob sort of shows it in a way that's a little more kind to reality of what, these would probably have to go in a little more straight fashion across here to connect onto the Central Avenue piping that exists over here.
That garage is going to be on a slab,
Yes.
so you could run the culvert underneath it.
That
Well,
would not be the most ideal, in my opinion, because of the fact that
I
it's got
understand.
frost walls, and then if anything goes wrong, you're essentially,
I understand.
these people's drainage just gets ruined when you're, sorry, we're not ripping down the garage to fix it.
I believe FEMA dictates that the
Oh, yeah.
frost wall foundation has to be solidly backfilled, packed, so it can't have anything.
There's a nice clear argument that you.
Yeah, so included in the application was a letter from Warren Jarrow of Associated Design Partners dictating the levels these had to be at and the conditions of backfilling, and the fact that we couldn't build over here, because we really, ideally, we'd slide it across here and keep it in the BE zone. That's not necessarily going to fly.
So is there any way to quantify John's assertion that moving the house to the south will increase in some quantitative way the sheet flow that goes down to the water and that runs off the property?
I mean, I guess you could take into account impervious surfaces and the quantity in a given area and know that this is all considered, unless, last time I checked, parking area, whether it's gravel, is considered to be impervious.
Consider impervious. Suppose you just consider, suppose you just did away with the guest parking and made that lawn. Then you could move the house closer. You've got room to park, it looks like, 2 vehicles in front of the garage as well as in the garage. A lot of people just have stub driveways. That's
part of the grass, too.
Yeah, or park on the grass.
Yeah, and I guess the other,
And that would allow you to move the house closer.
and it would also probably move this way too, right? Because
Yeah.
if you move it down, you have to realize this line means you have to move it this way as well. So essentially, we're getting back to covering up this area over here, right? So as you move it down this way,
But you
again,
could-
if it could go straight down here, that would be an easy solution, but it has to essentially.
It looks like there's, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet there before you run into the VE zone line.
Well, the other thing we have to maintain is a 15-foot setback from the septic field.
Yeah, but you look to be essentially parallel in the septic field, so.
How will John's drainage that he was discussing be affected by the septic system that's going to be 3 feet up in the air? I mean, it's obviously not going to follow the contours that are there now.
Yeah, I mean, the
It's going to be
septic,
a mound.
luckily, we're not
Yeah.
actually,
Substantial.
where it connects to the drainage over here, you're saying?
Well, I mean, I've got basically 39 inches from natural ground to the top of the crown of the system. Fairly substantial mound. I'm just wondering how that's going to affect the drainage. I don't see those
Well, no, they're maximum.
those gradient lines
The
on your
contours,
finished
yeah.
plan, so I'm just curious as to how they would be affected once you put that mound in.
James?
Yeah, septic.
That's right there.
So it's referring to the septic as well.
Page 3, cross section AA.
So the intention is to toe fill around this particular septic system, that we actually would use that as part of the elevation that would tie into the berm that we're trying to build around the face of this foundation to negate the amount of exposed foundation that you see from the waterside elevation.
Yeah.
We're trying to
So
feather
we no
all
longer
this.
have that same sheeting effect that you would with the contour as it is now. That would be elevated this high.
We're elevating this here.
So essentially, it's gonna slope, it's, existing site right now slopes this way. The new site will slope this way as well. It'll just be a little bit higher and obviously considerably higher in this area because of the fact.
Well, and considerably higher where the system is. I guess I'm just trying to clarify that, so I get that in my head. Again,
That'll be,
those-
yeah, so the sketch is sort of makes it look like it completely goes up like this, but.
Well, I mean, it does, really, Frank.
I think-
That's my guess.
I think we're going like
I mean,
this.
it is going to be just like that. It is going to be a mound. And so as that water comes downhill, it's going to hit that upper toe slope, and it's going to shoot towards Central Ave. And I'm only asking, just to clarify, how that either reinforces John Dunsford's thought that perhaps that location is good or it's bad. Again, just looking for further clarification to justify the greatest practical extent.
There was a topo.
Yeah,
There was on the original, I just didn't see anything
There's, yeah, there
with the
is.
finished proposed plan.
That would be something, yeah.
So, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have a couple of things that you might look at to help decrease the nonconformity of the setback on the back of the house. And one is removing the stone guest parking area and replacing it with lawn and moving the house, it looks like, I don't know, 5-6 feet towards Central Avenue. And also with that, regrading the, and you just said it, you thought you would be regrading between the septic and the house to have it flatter rather than diverting the way it shows on the plan now.
Yeah, I still think there'll be diversion, but okay.
And then maybe some attempt at quantitative runoff analysis to see what that would be to support John's argument. And I'm not looking for a tenth of a gallon, flow, but it ought to be within, I
No, I'm
think.
just assuming the rain's gonna hit that that
Yeah.
driveway, and it's all gonna run to the left,
Yeah.
and it's nice
So
to have lawn there.
a simple area calculation and then some assumption on
Get an inch of rain here, where's it gonna go?
how much absorption you get per area of grass, per square foot of grass.
So basically, Bill, are you suggesting that we table review of the application for a month and?
I'm not ready to say this is the greatest practical extent at this point in time without seeing some additional data. I think they've also got to clean up the height issue
Yeah.
with the contours. So yeah, that's where I'm headed.
Okay, so should we have a motion and?
Tom, I have one more.
Eventually, but I'm not sure we're done discussing.
Yeah, I'm still in the discussion mode. It looks to me, it looks to me, from quick analysis, just staring at these topo lines right now, that the higher elevation is between the house and the garage. So, that's my guess.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, this maintains a lower elevation here, and you see this steps up.
Yeah,
This slopes this way, obviously. 'cause
Okay.
This is lower, and as you move the house over, this gets to be a very steep slope, or there's no slope at all, it's just like a much more exposed foundation, so it looks like a house that's essentially, when you walk in the door, so there's a rock, this is stone veneer, so it'd be like a rock wall, and you
Yeah.
go up a big set of stairs, and so.
I guess what I'm talking
Yeah.
about is the green space between the garage and the house on
Yeah,
the east
here.
side there. It looks to me that appears, from my quick reading of the topo, to be the highest area.
That's correct, that's 20 feet there.
That's 20 feet. So the house is below that, the garage is above that. So it seems to me that we could move the house slightly to the east.
I thought the house was at 23.
The house, well, we're talking about the finished floor.
The finished grade.
Yeah.
And you go up, and there's obviously exposed foundation, so if we're talking about the finish, then
No, I
that's
was talking about the
correct.
existing grade right here.
I'm talking about the existing
Yeah.
grade
Yeah.
is about 20 feet there. And it seems to me it would help you for FEMA regulations and all that if you were to move the house closer to the garage, maybe not attached, but because I was looking at the drawings and looking at the windows and everything, and you certainly don't want to have eliminate windows in the laundry room or the mechanical room.
Yeah, and
But
as you
those
get
aren't,
closer, it
those
does
aren't
become more of an
view
alleyway.
windows, those are ventilation
Yeah.
windows. And it seems to me, for the greatest extent, you could move it slightly easterly and still have the same effect.
Yeah, mentioned that.
This also, I think this also highlights that we really need to see a post-development topo.
Yeah,
I don't think we have.
I think we're close.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're close.
And as part of your, or the request we'd make is that we see a calculation that if each of these factors were taken into consideration, how far down, keeping your same square footage of living space, would we pull the property so that it doesn't encroach within the setback?
so I guess one question would be, we're essentially saying, trying to move this so it still potentially crosses the setback line, right? It's
Yeah.
still gonna be non-conforming.
Right, but how
Just
far
trying to
back
get
can you
to
put
be-
it? And there are basically three calculations. If you take
Yeah.
out the parking, if you merged the space between the garage and the house, what would just be the numeric impact of that? And if you can move the house down, if you do that, that would be the third.
So
Just the
And I
calculation,
think
not the
really
aesthetic,
paint
et cetera. The aesthetics we can address later.
is with each of those things, what would be the impact, such as John said about, runoff of surface water? Because obviously, you can move the house, down towards Central Avenue or over, but, it's like, what's the impact going to be?
Yeah,
Well, didn't they say though, early on, that the existing culvert, which is not have to be moved here, was more than adequate to handle the runoff now? So I don't understand the point.
so the culvert is dealing with neighbor's property.
There's nothing.
Which-
Well,
still-
whatever, runoff's
Yeah.
runoff, no matter
Runoff
what
on the
refrigerants,
current
from up there or over
property
there.
doesn't
Yeah.
drain into that culvert.
Oh, that was one of my initial questions.
Well, where is it going now?
Into the grassy areas that
Into the
surround.
grassy area.
So right now, they've got a lot of different structures and there's space in between them because they're all non-conforming. Right here, we're proposing to have space in between them.
Right, but if the
The
building is
left
extended,
side.
moves to the right, you still have the same amount of grass area.
You do, but it's only on one area and it's an area where the roof isn't draining as much. We got a slope, so essentially, yeah.
Right, but that's why the calculation for removal of the parking is relevant in grass area. That expands the grass area. Yes?
All right, so the impact.
So what are the calculations, is
Yeah.
all we're asking.
And part of impact, if you move the house and join the garage, you're giving up the facade of 15% of your house. That's an
Yeah.
impact that you can describe. It's a very
Exactly.
negative impact to a house to give up 15% of the
Yeah.
facade. Got it. More important to me is right now, the garage disengages all of its water on three sides with grass. It's done, it's over. You don't have to think about it anymore. If you add it to the house, it now becomes additive to the house, now what are you gonna do? And you can't increase the rate of flow off the site from what it is today. So you can't make the house so that it gains so much water that it's now discharging, where today it's not discharging. You can't do that with EPA.
The sighting of the roof of the garage, John, you might want to take a look at that. Is not what you're describing.
You're saying switching the
No, I'm saying, yeah, the jetting of the
Yeah,
roof.
switching the
There's a right
slope of the
angles.
roof so that it would slope this way and that way, essentially sloping into.
Right, yeah, right now, half the water goes onto the impervious driveway and half goes onto
Probably is a
the...
gutter, I mean,
Yeah,
it's, I mean, you can switch the roof, you have gutters, you don't have gutters. The point is, if you want to retain the water in the grass, it's pretty easy. Connect it to the house, it's less easy. And you give up all that facade.
Well, that's why we're making the calculations. That's why the request is made, to make those calculations and not speculate.
So is the board, I'm trying to make a list of things here that you were looking for next time. Would you like existing stormwater runoff calculations, talking about rate flow, existing and proposed?
No.
What I had asked for was rough area calculations of the water runoff. I was not asking for a full stormwater runoff report.
They don't need to do a full engineer report.
I'm just curious, when you, again, you're absolutely right when you're saying you can't increase the rate of flow. So I'm just trying to think about how we want to determine how we are, if we are.
Yeah,
So,
there's an issue which we have not really addressed, which is the one that you pointed out in the beginning, John. Right now, you've got these two gravel spillways that come down and then sheet onto the surface, right? And so there's some absorption as they wend their way down to the shore. And if you put them all on a culvert, that absorption goes away. We shouldn't lose fact that there's a goodly part of this property that exists between them and the shore that's not being utilized for any of the water absorption that could be. Just a
And he's
thought.
paving and turning it into a driveway, so that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, the things I have on my list, Jeff, are the height, the impact of reducing the impervious driveway, particularly the parking spot out in front, which would allow them to move the house south and perhaps east, and reduce the amount of setback variance that's being caused there, the septic grading, and looking for post-development topographic lines.
okay. Anything else?
Is there anything else that I've missed? And let me just say, thank you for looking at all this stuff in detail and trying to do a good job of it. I don't want you to come away with the impression that we're naysaying on all of this. It's a tough lot with a lot going on. And,
Yes, it's
and
true, it is.
we need to make sure that the setbacks are met to the greatest possible extent. And I gotta say, you know, if someone held our feet to the fire with the codes, we could say, no, you can't have that big a house. You know, the size of the house you're allowed to build is not guaranteed.
Except they are going from 4-bedroom to 4-bedroom, be it in 2 different buildings.
I understand, but that's the part we went through in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because they are not, it'd be a totally different story if they were saying, we're gonna remodel and expand the existing structure. Then what you say is exactly true. But since that's being taken down, essentially they're starting new on the property. That's what our code says. We don't get to make that decision.
We did do, not to be contrary to that, but we did include it in that sort of analysis that we had with the code was the letter from the land use attorney agreeing with sort of essentially what you just said, less, not being more non-conforming on the site and using that rebuild at equal or, lesser area and volume sort of as in between, like reading in between the lines, agreeing with that as being possible.
If you were rebuilding with the same volume and area, I think you have a strong argument. Yeah, absolutely, but you're not. Is there anything else? So the big picture is you will provide us with this information prior to our next meeting, and then we will table it until then.
Okay.
Does that work for the board?
Is there a motion to?
I think we need a motion for that.
You want to move it? I'll make the motion.
I'll second. It's been moved and seconded that we table this until the next meeting and await additional information from you guys on the plan.
All right, and we'll address these things and get
Okay.
information
All right.
as soon as we can, make sure it's ahead of time.
Any discussion? All in favor? It carries. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
The next order of business is Peapod Jewelry, represented by Ben Davis. One of you guys has to be Ben Davis.
I just have a little handout, if that's okay.
You're not Ben Davis, roofer, huh?
The roofer?
Yeah.
No, not the roofer, not today. Thank you very much. Can I start or?
Yes.
Okay, great, excellent. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Ben Davis. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you folks. We've got a pretty simple just introduction tonight. One of my clients is interested in coming to Booth Bay, and they couldn't make it this evening, so they asked me to come and chat with you folks and really just introduce and show you what we do in our product, the Opbox. So I own the Opbox company. We're the manufacturer of pop-up commercial spaces right here in Maine. We're a year old. My sister and I started this business a little over a year ago. We're both from the Mid-Coast, from Lincoln County. We grew up in Noblesboro, and we build pop-up spaces out of portable storage units. So we have another business called Portland Container Company, where we're Southern Maine's local version of pods. And we had the problem of 3 out of 4 of our customers would come in our units and say, I want to work in this, I want to live in it, and all of that. I have a boat building background, and so we came up with some designs. We teamed up with Gamage Shipyard, which is also in your neighborhood, which is right across the bay, and they're our manufacturing partner, and we developed the Opbox. So we build retail and hospitality pop-up spaces, mobile temporary spaces. We have 5 standard models, and we spent the last year developing it, and now we've got customers all over Maine and outside the state. We're just shipping to Austin, Texas right now, and so it's happening quickly. But what I'm here tonight is just to answer any questions about our product, because one of our clients, Peapod Jewelry, which, Jeff, I don't know if you circulated there.
I did, yeah.
Okay, great. So they're a great local business. One of the advantages of the Opbox is it gives both startup businesses and established businesses the opportunity to get into a space for a reasonable amount of cost and be able to go to their customers instead of the traditional brick and mortar having their customers and all of that goes along with that come to them. So Peapod has a great brick and mortar space in Edgecombe, and they're looking to gain some attention and awareness of what they do, and they would love to be part of the Booth Bay community seasonally. So we often get confused with, we're kind of creating a new category here with Opbox because we're not a brick and mortar. As you can see around the country, there's lots of shipping container modifications. That's really more on the permanent structure side. They modify shipping containers, put them in place, and you basically have a steel building. Our unit is built of a portable storage container, so they're built to be logistically friendly and mobile, so these can deploy on a daily basis all over. Some real-life examples of how they're getting used is our first unit a year ago went in Congress Square Park. We have a great partnership with the Parks and Recreation Department in Portland. So our first unit, which there's a picture of the inside there, deployed in the park. They did 175 community events out of it last summer. This summer they're doing pop-up concessions out of it. We also sell to tour operators. So Portland Paddles and one of the projects we have under construction right now where they use the box and rent out kayaks and stand-up paddleboards and that sort of stuff. That's on the East End Beach in Portland. There's also great food providers and stuff like that, working with Cousins Maine Lobster to replace their food trucks with off boxes, hopefully all over the country. So that is our product. I know, Jeff, we had some question on whether or not it's a temporary structure. Again, we're answering this question a lot right now. We're kind of defining our own category, where we're not a food truck, but we're also not a brick and mortar permanent structure, because these are built to be logistically friendly. They do have wheels. They're totally self-contained, and all of that. So I'm here to basically gauge the needs and the motivations of your community and see if there's a fit.
Is there a standard size?
8 by 16.
8 by 16.
Yeah, so about a parking space.
And how much does it weigh?
Sure. So depending on the model, so our full kitchen model is up in the 7,000 pound range with all the equipment and everything. The standard retail models, Peapod Jewelry has chosen the showroom OS that opens on the side like that. That is down at it's about 3,500 pounds.
Okay, and how long does it take to place or recover?
Sure. Usually, so these generally can be moved around by any flatbed tow truck in the world. You can literally call AAA, or we have tow truck partners around here. It's less than 10 minutes. It's about 8 minutes from the time the unit gets on scene until it's fully offloaded and ready to go, and vice versa, picking it up. And the wheels are attached to receivers on the ends, so you can literally pick up one side of the tow truck and parallel park it just like a boat trailer.
How do they hook up for utilities?
So we have a couple different options. They can be totally self-sustained, so we have a generator, we have a solar option, we have a great solar partner in Caprock Renewables in Texas who designed a solar system for them, so they can be completely off-grid, or we have an on-grid setup that if you plug into city or private utilities, they can just plug right in, and it's the same thing with water. And if we were to talk about any of our food service models, we have onboard holding tanks for gray water and fresh water and all of that. And also I think it's probably important to say we are categorized as a Maine State mobile vending unit when it comes to food stuff.
Maine State mobile vending unit.
Yes.
That is a classification.
Yes, that is. Like a food truck.
Okay.
So if somebody's coming here to set up a retail, what are they asking for? What kind of permit are they asking for?
So I consider this a structure. So you're asking to build a structure. Where Peapod specifically, they were looking to locate where Shannon's Unshelled was.
Sure.
And Shannon's Unshelled was approved at the time as a trailer, a licensed motor vehicle. So it wasn't a structure, we didn't have to worry about the setbacks, we didn't have to worry about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I think at the time, we didn't really take into consideration the fact there were also too many uses already on a too small lot, but hindsight, we realize that now. Anyway, so when they suggested that would be the location, it's structure. According to our definition, it houses goods, it houses people, it houses things, it's structure. We don't differentiate between temporary and permanent structures, so it's structure. And then, unfortunately, we also had some complications with shoreline zoning and lot coverage and other things. But they'd be coming to us for a building permit and coming to you guys for use.
It might be worthwhile to read the definition of structure, because it's pretty clear. Anything built for the support, shelter, or enclosure of persons, animals, goods, or property of any kind, together with anything constructed or erected with a fixed location on or in ground or over water, exclusive of fences, poles, wiring, and other aerial equipment normally associated with service drops, as well as guying and guy anchors. The term includes structures temporarily or permanently located, such as decks, patios, tower, satellite dishes that are 30 inches or greater in diameter. You can tell when that was written. So since it does house people and goods, it's a structure.
So how do you handle things that are not built on site?
Such as?
So our product wouldn't be built there, so it arrives and it's.
Yep, it's still got a fixed location on the earth, or it's on the ground, and it's built for the enclosure of people, bits and things.
Exactly. It's like a modular home.
Yep, so building permit? Yep.
How does
Okay,
it,
great.
how does it differ from, you said it has wheels though, so it's really mobile. And I'm trying to wrap my head around the difference between mobile and permanent structure. And I need help with this one.
Well, for instance, mobile home is mobile,
Yeah.
but it's.
Shannon on Sheld was mobile.
It's mobile, exactly, but we say that it was basically licensed as a trailer with the Department of Motor Vehicles.
You're not listed as a trailer, you're listed as a structure?
They're not
With
probably
MVP?
listed.
He's probably not listed at all, but he's certainly not a trailer. You couldn't go to DMV and get a license plate for it.
We haven't attempted that.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
I think it's just that our ordinance thus far has never addressed something like.
Personally,
Absolutely.
I'd love to have Peapods come down to Booth Bay Harbor.
Yeah.
I think it's a great fit.
And that's sort of just more what the conversation is that specific location doesn't sound like a.
I think that's tight for anybody.
Yeah.
I think it just
Yeah.
is. I think it already is sort of maxed out. It's a very small lot.
Yeah.
With 2 uses already on the lot.
Yep.
Any more, we just don't have the ability to put
Sure.
more uses on, so that lot's just really tight.
Absolutely.
But certainly, if there's other locations, we would
Yeah.
still consider that.
Parking lot near there that might be for sale for a very long time.
Yeah, right?
They might want to lease some space.
Right, and again, so hey, if you drop that and you had that in the, you just got, again, you have to have all the setbacks of a normal structure. 75 feet from the water, side yard setbacks, road setbacks, all those things.
If there were,
Not in the business district.
Well, no, that's true, in downtown business district, yeah, you'd be able to do something.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to have the 75 feet, but you still got the lot
But
coverage.
you still got lot
But you
coverage.
can effectively fit in a parking space, not on the road, obviously,
Right,
but
yeah.
off-road parking space in the downtown business district.
Yeah, it's the size of
Not
this
that
room,
we have a lot,
it's this,
but yeah.
it's this carpeted area, give or take.
and if these were to, so for example, how they're being used in the Portland area, they'll be in one spot, so we have a license agreement with the city, and we have 4 locations, and occasionally there'll be an event at East End Beach, and one of the units in Back Cove will move over for that event. Would we need, if something like that were to happen, or if we had, and also we go into communities and really want to merchandise these specific uses based on what's already there, and that's a really important thing. So what can add to the community, not just randomly putting retail or hospitality or anything like that, but like you said, if Peapod is a fit, that's fantastic. But if they moved around the town in locations that were pre-approved, would that require a building permit every time, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a structure, and I require a building permit for every structure.
Okay, and even though it's leaving seasonally, so this would be.
Doesn't matter to me, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's temporary or it's permanent. It doesn't matter if it's there for a day or if it's there for years.
Sure.
It's a
So I'm
structure.
telling you what we have.
Right.
If Portland has figured out how to do something different, there's no reason why you can't share that with Jeff.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely. That's what I was just saying.
Our
before. We
codes
just
are
have to
archaic
test
in
it.
some regards,
Sure.
and this is clearly one of them, and Jeff and I were talking the other day, tiny houses.
Yes.
You know, our code, it doesn't have any way to handle those, and yet in some instances, it looks like a great idea
Sure.
to handle things. You would also need I think there's a peddler's license you need from the select board.
You need a hawkers and peddler's license from there,
Yeah.
or victualer's license.
That could be good for a
food.
year, though.
Yeah. But they, again, they're site specific, right? I mean, it's not as easy to hop around, I guess. And I think it's a great concept, but I just think that we would have to address it in our ordinance at multiple levels.
Yeah.
Infrastructure, you'll need, Portland's probably figured it out.
So we will add it to our list of things we need to update our codes on.
Yeah. We have an ongoing list that we try to get to.
Sure.
How can we help with
Uh,
that?
You know how Portland sounds like they figured it out. Share with us what you do down there.
Okay, great. And just give that to Jeff?
Yeah.
How this works?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then, once we take a look at that together, Jeff, we can,
Yeah, we would, I mean, just so you understand the timeframe,
yeah,
any ordinance changes will be a year from now.
Yeah, this is
If we decide to change ordinances.
We're not going anywhere.
Right, right. So it's a long process. These guys discuss it.
Next year, maybe there's something different.
Great, so what I'm hearing is there is a path for this year, we can look at more of a long-term plan and
If you can find a parcel in the downtown business district that can support another structure.
Yeah.
Then get a building permit.
And
You're good to
another
go.
use. I mean, don't forget
And
that there's.
another
What
use.
about the square footage
What's that?
requirement for
What about in the
usages
meadows?
last year?
Okay. Yeah, I think, conceivably, you could have someplace like the Meadow Mall. You might be able to put something in the parking lot, but again, there's a lot of uses there. I'm not sure how much land, so we have to think about how much we have. I think there's enough. But that would be one site perhaps. We were talking about the corridor when you're coming into town on Route 27.
Where the small mall is, right at the.
The downtown business district is gonna be pretty tough.
Okay.
Just think everything, it probably has more uses already.
Well, that could be this.
I think the downtown area would be, for something like Peapod would be ideal.
I, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I just don't know where you put it, that's all. Okay.
But it sounds intriguing, and anything that supports boat building skills, I enjoy.
Yeah, we're actually creating more boat building jobs, building op boxes and boats.
Yeah,
So it's a fun thing.
I can see that.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Beth.
Thank you.
Anything else before we adjourn? I will entertain a motion.
I would move that we adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. This is not debatable. All in favor? We're adjourned.